Cool. So let's just get straight in there. So I know you through Sonia, who's a really good friend of mine from Holland. Well, she's from Germany, but we know each other through living in the Netherlands together. And she sent me an email one day, or maybe even just WhatsApp, and said, "Listen, you need to interview this guy." And then for the rest, she knows she can't tell me why. We had our brief 5-minute conversation last week, just so you could hear my voice. And you mentioned that you had given a talk at booking.com, which is where you guys met. And that's, I presume, now where you still work. And let's just go in there. So you start, tell me, pick up from that point for me.
I think the story starts a little bit earlier than that.
Yeah.
So, yes, I did give that talk at Booking, and I got some really good feedback from it. But so there was an opportunity, they said, they had an opportunity for, so it was like a mini TED Talk within the office, it was called Be Storytellers. And they just asked for people who have stories to share, and I signed up because I felt, personally, I believe that every life worth living is worth telling. And sometimes we go through our own experiences, and because they're ours, we don't see anything in them. But there's people actually on the brink of just giving up, and all they just need to hear is somebody who has been through something that they can relate to and say, oh, if they've been able to come through this, I am able to come through this as well. And so I got inspired to just stand up and share my story. And I got some really good feedback about it.
And okay, so all right, so that's what you're saying there. So tell our audience where you're from, and then why you're in Holland. We're going to get to obviously we want to know what you said in the talk, but obviously, tell us about your background. You're not from the Netherlands. You're living in the Netherlands. Give our listeners a sense of that and what brought you to the Netherlands, or is that maybe like the story?
Yes, it is the story. So I'm originally from Uganda. I was born and raised in Uganda. And I'm one of 4 children. And growing up, what I remember is my dad left Uganda in 1989 when I was about 4 years old. And my big brother was about 6. My young sister was 2 years old, and my youngest brother was about 2 weeks old. And Dad went to the States, the United States of America. And from what I understood, in my little mind, I thought he had abandoned us. What my mom told me, he went on a plane. And from just that age of 4 years old, I just got fascinated with airplanes. And for me, I thought, every time I would see a plane fly over the Kampala skyline where we lived, I was just imagining myself sitting in the plane and looking down and just seeing what's happening on the ground and just going where my dad was. Because growing up, I felt for me that I needed a male figure in my life to just help me learn some of the things that a boy learns from a father. Yes, Dad did well in sending money, and he provided for us, but his physical presence wasn't there. And for me, that's what I missed the most. And because of that, I ended up getting in a lot of trouble. I got in trouble with my neighbors. I got in trouble with the police. I got in trouble at school. And it was just one thing. If it wasn't this, it was something else. But through it all, my mom just wouldn't let me get out of school. We fought. She disciplined me. When we were growing up, actually, we used to call her Major.
Yeah.
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 Because
Yeah.
if it's discipline time, you know you're in trouble. It's
Mm.
and because I mean, and I'm forever grateful because the job she did was really wonderful, and I feel like Abraham Lincoln when he said that all that I am and all that I ever ought to be, I owe to my mother. I mean, she stuck with us through and through, and she didn't give up on us. She didn't leave us, and but just all through this experience, for me, the thing that I just wanted the most was just to get on a plane and just go where my dad was.
Mm. Mm.
Because I just felt I just needed that male figure in my life. When we were
Yeah.
in school, because I was in boarding school from a very young age, and my schoolmates would say, yeah, uh, my mom and my dad visited, my mom and my dad visited. And all I could ever say was my mom visited. And they started asking me, what's up with your dad? Why doesn't he ever come to visit you? And that
Mm.
also just caused some feelings about it. And I was acting up as far as that was concerned. And then by the time I was around 12, I just knew for me that it was not a matter of if it would happen, but rather when it would happen.
Mm.
That I will travel. Because I was
Mm.
just thinking about it every day. We
Mm.
would be in the compound playing football, and they would put me in the goal in the just to be the goalkeeper because I just wasn't like a big fan of football, but because they were
Yeah.
playing in my compound, they just couldn't just play without me.
Yeah.
So they're like,
Yeah.
yeah, let's put him in the goal, and then playing passes, and then there I am daydreaming again. I'm just looking at the plane, and then the ball just comes and gets in the goal, and they're like, he's sleeping again. I'm like, guys, I'm not sleeping. Look at the plane; it's right there. And we used to
Yeah.
play these games. Like the first person who used to see the plane would be like, "Yeah, that's my plane. That's my plane. Look at my plane." And so
Mm.
I was always into that mindset. And but it didn't happen for me. And then, of course, the I was expecting somehow that my dad would maybe send for us,
Yeah.
and he never did. And what I
Mm.
didn't understand is why he didn't.
Mm.
Because in my young mind, I just didn't make sense. I'm like, and later on, I realized, okay, I have to figure this out my way. When I'm about 20, I get the first opportunity to go to the States. It was for a conference. I was excited. I was just fired up. I
Mm.
knew this is the opportunity I've been waiting for, and I prepared. Somebody helped me to arrange all the documents that I needed to apply for the visa, and I just was awake the whole night. In the morning, I went to the embassy to submit my application. When I submitted the application, the I mean the person who's like doing the application, she looked at me and then she asked me a question, what's the purpose of your stay going to the States? And I'm
Mm.
like, to go for
Yeah.
a conference. And in as if in one move, she's still looking at me. She picks up a stamp, stamps my passport, writes something on paper, ticks something, and then puts it back in my passport and hands it back to me. And she's like, next. I'm like, wait, is that it? So I'm like, because they had told me already, if you go to the embassy and they give you the visa, they will tell you to pick your passport later.
Mm.
I'm like,
Mm.
maybe she's made a mistake and just put it in right now. But I'm like, from the little knowledge I have, it's supposed to be a sticker and not a stamp. What is happening here? So I pick up all the papers and I'm like, I'm trying to explain. And she's like, next, just everything is in the papers. So I sit back down and I look at the papers and I check the stamp in the passport and it says application received.
Mm.
And then I check on the paper and there's all these reasons for visa rejection. And she has ticked one that I have not shown enough social or culture ties to prove that when I go to the States, I'll be coming back after the purpose of my stay. And I was like, she didn't even let me explain. So I was trying to go back to explain the situation. And she's like,
Yeah.
somebody else was already on the counter. And the
Mm.
security was like, think we should escort you out? And I was like, is this it? Is this the dream or the thing that I've been working and waiting for to happen for so long, and now it's just over like that?
Mm.
I got out of that embassy with my head down. I was like, I just couldn't believe what just happened. And because I was in a very, like, this is the thing I was looking forward to the most. When it didn't happen, I just got crushed at a very deep level. I
Yeah.
went into just I just basically went home and dropped my papers and went to the bar. I soaked myself in alcohol. I just got drunk. The next morning I woke up with a headache and I decided to just drink again. And a pattern formed. And I just didn't realize that I was just getting myself locked in a loop. And I felt it was easier for me to stay drunk than to have a hangover.
Yeah.
People were telling me, yeah, you have a drinking problem. I'm like, no, I'm just a social drinker.
Mm.
And it's just this just went on and on and on and on and on for almost 2 years. But at this point, I'm now walking with my passport every day. I had this my friends used to make fun of me. I had a backpack. I had my King James Bible in it.
Yeah.
I had my passport.
Mm.
I had a bottle of water. I had a T-shirt, my phone charger, and a pen. And
Mm-hmm.
I took that bag everywhere.
Yeah.
And my friends were just making fun of me. They say he's packed his bag, but he has nowhere to go.
Oh
He
no.
has a
So tell me what, so let's just back up a bit. So your dad, did he go to America? Did he go with the intention of supporting? Was that the reason why he left? Did he go so that, he could make money and send it back home? Is it what, and what did your dad do? Well, what does he do?
So the whole reason why he went was to just look for better opportunities, because right about that
Mm,
time there was
mm,
because my dad and my grandfather were in uh, the coffee business. My
mm,
grandfather had a big coffee processing plant in Uganda, but
yeah,
around uh, with the war that had started in '86, uh, the war that ushered the current leadership into power in Uganda,
mm,
just devastated the whole thing with as far as that aspect of their business was concerned. And my dad felt he needed to do something to find better opportunities for himself as
yeah,
far as the future was concerned.
mm,
So he went to the States to find s- greener pastures, if I could say it like that.
mm, yeah,
But
yeah,
getting there, he realizes that uh, I understand this later after I've had these conversations with him that, I mean, what happened? And he's like, I got here and I submitted an application for integration and it just took its own time. Basically, he waited about 20 years for that and it didn't come through. So he couldn't come back to Uganda and then go back to the States. So he just decided to stay and do whatever he had to do to earn a living and send money to Uganda. And this I understand later as an adult. So getting back into it, like when I realized that this is what was happening and my application had been rejected, I just went onto that trajectory. But I realized something had to change as far as
mm,
this was concerned. I
mm,
knew that because the way that I was living now was I was reckless. I was, for lack of a better word. One time I was arrested by the police and charged for being a rogue and a vagabond. And and then I hear that my dad is coming to Uganda in 2007 for the first time, because now his papers have matured. He has the green card and he can travel, and I'm excited. I'm like a 2-year old.
Yeah.
I'm telling all my friends, my dad is coming to Uganda. My dad is coming to Uganda. And then when he comes and I meet him, they've already like told him about all these things that I was doing. To backtrack a bit, before, even when he was not there, every time I was in trouble, he was informed about it. Yeah. And so when I would get on the phone, we used to speak with him like every week. And like I would be excited to speak with him, but every time I would get on the phone, it would be a lecture. What's this you're doing? You're wasting your life and you're not being responsible and this and that. And I'm like, I was excited to talk to him about my dreams and my goals, and then he's just taking me into this lecture. And by the time he's finished with lecturing me, basically the wind is out of my wings and I just don't want, I've had it.
Yeah, you don't want to share anything anymore. Yeah.
Exactly. And so this went on like this for quite a while. And I was like, who is it that tells him all these things? I was like, I wish I knew who it was. I would tear them a page. I'll, I'll just give them a piece of my mind. I'm like, but
Yeah.
he never told me who it is. And so I decided to write him a fax. And I'm like, I'm wondering, every time I do something wrong, you always tell me about it. But I've never had you tell me that I did something right. Every time we talk, you're just rebuking me for what I've done wrong and what I've done wrong and what I've done wrong. Is it that I never do anything right? Me, your son, even when a spoiled clock is correct twice a day? Is it that me, your son, just doesn't do anything good? Or they tell you about it, but you feel I don't need to hear it from you and only hear rebuke? He still talks about that fax to this day.
Wow.
So when he comes back in 2007, I'm excited. And then when I go to see him, he just goes all out. He's like, what is this I'm hearing? I expect better from you. I can't believe you're doing this. I can't believe this is happening. Everybody's saying you're giving them trouble. You're just being reckless. You're being irresponsible. If that's how you've chosen to live your life, go right ahead. I don't care. I have lived my life. You think if you waste your life away, mine would end? Do whatever you want. I don't care. And I was like, wow, this is not what I expected.
How old were you then?
I was about 23. This is not what I expected. And I just basically left and I just didn't see him again after that. He was still in Uganda for some time. We met, I think, 1 or 2 times again briefly, but I was just quick to get out of his presence because I was like, this is not what I expected.
But was he staying with your mom? Were your mom and him still together?
No. So for some time he was staying with my mom,
Yeah.
but he had another place where he was staying.
But were they
Uh,
separated then, or were they not together anymore?
so that's an interesting one because they're married, but they're not living together. So it's
Still.
so, yeah, still exactly. My dad lives in a different place, and my mom lives in a different place, and
So
so
did you grow up in a then, obviously if he had a coffee plantation, he must have been also fairly successful financially also. So did
yeah,
you, when you say you went to boarding school, was it the sort of private boarding school of Africa, a more sort of elitist
yeah,
crowd that you were socializing with?
yes. So
Okay.
there was, I mean, the money was there. Growing up, I just remember there was like he would go like on Monday to go and take the coffee. When I was young, I remember there was just on Friday when he comes back, they were just bringing bags and bags of money with, and I'm like, this is fun. And but you're a child and you just don't understand it. But growing
Mm.
up again, I realized we had uh, opportunities as far as that was concerned. But
Mm.
then growing up,
Privilege.
it was privilege, if I could say it like
Mm.
that. But when he leaves, yes, I was able to go to good schools and to have the education that I am grateful for because he uh, provided for that.
Mm.
Yeah. So he comes back and it just doesn't go the way I expected. I leave that
Mm.
meeting and I'm like, I have to change something. This is not, I'm going to have to do something to make my dad say he's proud of me. I'm going to have to make the changes that I need to make. And it was not easy. I realized that only when it became, I made it a must for myself. Because at first I was saying I have to change. I was saying this should change. I was saying, yeah, something has to change. But after that conversation with him, I just sat down and I thought about my life 10 years from then and
Mm.
had all these dreams. But I realized my dreams may still be here, but I'm not. Because if I continue like this, because I was hanging out with the wrong friends. I was going to all the wrong places. I was just getting drunk, started experimenting with drugs, smoking weed, and partying till late. He's like, one time he said, you're partying every day. A party is to celebrate. What are you celebrating? Every day you are partying. He said, everybody, he said, even the most irresponsible people that I know don't go out every day, but my son does. So I was like, all these things, when I thought about them, I was like, no, something has to change. And
Mm.
I just got on this journey of self reflection. And I told the people I was hanging out with, look, I've made some decisions for me to change the direction of my life. And they were like, somebody else maybe, but not you. You are
Yeah.
beyond repair. Basically, that's what my
Mm.
friends told me. And I was like, they say you're a loser. There's nothing that can come out of you. And I was like,
Yeah, but were they saying it in a, like guys talk, like, yo, whatever, dude, whatever, kind of like that sort of banter? Or was it really like, because I mean, if they're a real friend, they're not going to be, surely they're not going to, I mean, anyway, my friend will not tell me I'm a loser. Like, do you know
yeah,
what I'm saying? But maybe
exactly.
because I'm not a loser. But,
Exactly, like what you're talking about. So I'm thinking, are these real friends? Are these
okay.
the people that I think are my friends? Because they were serious. And so I made a decision to just distance myself from them. I realized
Mm.
they're not the people that I just want to hang out with.
Mm. Did
And
they also come
gradually,
from a class? Did they also come from more an elitist background, or what
yes,
was their
some
social status?
yes, they're also from uh, elite backgrounds, if I could say it like that. Good families, well educated, and
Mm.
And so I realized I'm like, yes, I've made some mistakes. I've made my share of mistakes, but uh, I don't think that makes me a loser because everybody has their own.
Mm.
And I, I decided to just separate myself from them and go on this journey for myself. And I realized I just have to be alone for a while, maybe. And that started to just get me on this journey of self discovery. I discovered personal development and I started to just read more and get interested in books, and basically that started me on this journey. And in 2009, all this while I'm just still moving with my backpack for about 3 years. and they're just making fun of me. They say, just there he is with his backpack again. The bag is packed. He has nowhere to go. And then in 2009, I get an opportunity to go to come to Europe.
Mm.
So I met this guy, and he says, yeah, if you would like to go to Schengen, I can connect you, and you can be leaving in 2 weeks. And I'm like, this guy's joking. But there's a way he was talking with a certain level of certainty that I was like, oh my goodness, why is he so sure of himself? So
Mm.
I was like, okay. So I went and spoke to my mom, and I had some little money saved up, and my mom helped me out with the rest of the money that I needed to arrange. And I went and saw him, and he's like, yeah, you have a passport? So I showed him my passport, and it was like worn out because I was just moving with it every day.
Mm. Mm.
And and he's like, I mean, in all my life, I've never seen a tired passport like this. What have you been doing with it?
Mm.
So
Yeah.
he's like, you can't travel with this. You need a new passport. So he gives me the forms that were right there on his desk, and he says, fill this in and bring it back tomorrow, and we get you a new passport. So I fill in the forms, and in 3 days, I have a new passport. And
Okay, so
then,
just hold on 2 secs there. What I want to know, because now we getting to a point now where it's partly, well, I don't know yet, but so just tell me, you finished school, and then
yes,
what did you study after that? Did you study? You didn't. You just
yes, I studied it. So when I finished with my A levels, I went to Aga Khan High School. So when I finished secondary school in my O levels,
yeah.
I I got good grades. I went to uh, St. Joseph's. So I got good grades, and I was posted to another school, another boarding school. Uh,
Mm.
but I just was in a very rough place at that time. And within 2 months, I was indefinitely suspended from that school. They say, just, you're not welcome here. Don't ever come back until.
Because of taking drugs or alcohol or what?
So what happened is we were just partying all the time. And so what happened with that time, my dad and mom they were not in communication. They just had their own adult things going on.
Mm.
My mom uh, arranges to make sure that I have all the money that I need to go to school. And so she pays the fees and everything. She buys all the requirements.
Mm.
But she had asked my dad to send the money, but he didn't respond. And then 2 days before I went to school, my dad calls me, and he asks me, so how much do you need to go to school? And I tell him, and he sent me the equivalent of about $400 roughly.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
He says, and basically that's the remaining bit that I needed to just make sure that I have my requirements met and all.
Mm.
But everything was already paid for. So I go to school, boarding school, with $400 equivalent, and and it was
So basically,
just,
you told him your mom had paid for it all, but you told him you still needed $400, which you actually
yeah,
pocketed yourself.
yeah. So I went to school with that money, and we
Mm.
were just going out every day, just getting drunk, and they expelled me. And my mom said, look, with this way you're living, I don't know what to do, but find yourself a school where you can study with this behavior of yours.
Mm.
But if nothing changes, life is going to teach you the lessons that life will teach you. I've done my part. So I went to Aga Khan High School. Uh, it's an
Is that a
international
known
school.
high school? You say it in a
Yeah.
way with the name. What is it? What school is that?
So it's an international school.
Mm.
Uh, it's a day school, but it's international. So because it's close to home, and then I was able to like just study from there. I did my A
Yeah.
levels there, and then I went to university. I did a diploma in business administration, And through all this struggle, because my mom just wouldn't let me get out of school, and I was able to finish that. So I finished with
Yeah.
my diploma in 2006, and then I started working. I was doing some sales exec. I was like a sales manager for a construction company, but all the while just doing my thing, just being reckless and, if for lack
Yeah.
of a better word. And then
So,
when I
so why did you study business administration? What was that? Why did you do that?
the whole concept of business interested me because
Mm.
that's what I saw my uh, what I understood my dad, the direction my dad had gone. When I was in school, I wanted to do engineering at first, but I failed mathematics. So I was like,
Mm.
let me just go for business administration.
Yeah.
And that's the direction that I went as a result of that.
Yeah. So then what was your first job after studying that?
I was a sales manager for a construction company.
Okay. And
Yes.
then was there another job?
No, I first started as a sales executive for a spare parts company, like a company that deals in spare parts. And then I
Mm-hmm.
became a sales manager for a construction company.
Yes.
And,
Okay.
and basically, that's what I did.
Yeah. And then how did you come across this other guy who now where you say you're going to start organizing the passport? How did you come across him?
Um, so everyone in my network knew that Kenneth is all about. Actually, they used to call me international. If they could hear anybody talking about arranging travel things, they just knew that I needed to speak to that person.
Mm.
So it was through my network, somebody that I knew that knew someone. They said, "Yeah, you need to speak to this guy." And so when I meet him, and he's like, "Yeah, if you have the money that I need, you'll be on a plane in 2 weeks."
Mm.
And I'm like, "Huh." So at first I was a bit skeptical because there's another incident that had happened with somebody else who had just ripped me off,
Uh,
similar like that. But with the way he was like sure of himself, I was like,
yes.
okay, let me
Felt
give
good.
this, let me give this a shot.
Mm.
I get into his office and he has all these papers, the documents that for applying for passports. I'm like, I thought these things are supposed to be in the Ministry of Internal Affairs. He just has them here. So I'm like, okay, I think this guy knows what he's all about. So when I fill the papers, in 3 days, I go and pick up my passport at the ministry.
Yeah.
And he says, just bring the passport to me. And then we sit and talk. And he tells me the money that he needed. It was, uh, he asked for, was about 6 million. Yeah.
Which is what equivalent in dollars?
Would be about 1,000, could say about $1,000, give or take. So I'm like,
Mm.
okay. So I talked to my mom and she helped me out with that. I go to his office, I give him all the papers, and I just didn't understand how he did what he did. What, he tells me, come back tomorrow morning. So it was Friday. He says, come back on Monday when you're ready to go and submit your application. So I go to his office. I ask him, do I need to arrange anything? He said, I'll take care of everything for you. So I get there and he gives me this file and he says, go. So when I reach the embassy, I'm like, I receive a text message from him and he says, submit on the counter on the left. just at the message you sent me. So I'm like, okay. I just go and submit my application. And when the lady there opened the file like this, she just like went through all the forms and then just opened to one of the pages and showed me a mistake on that page. And I'm like, what is this? I'm like, this is messed up. This is not going any way that I expected. He's like, yeah, take it back and fix it, and maybe you can come back. And I'm like, this is not right. There's something that's not going the way it's supposed to here. So I'm broken. I get out of the embassy and I'm like, I can't believe this. And I go back to his office. I call him and he's like, just come. It's all right. Just leave everything here and come back tomorrow. I'm like, man, you don't understand what you told me. He's like, I know. Don't worry. Just go home, rest, and just come back tomorrow. So I explained everything to my mom and she's like, I don't know what's happening. I'm like, there was mistakes in these things. And then I go back in the morning and basically I'm like, let me just finish this because I started it, but I don't think it's going anywhere. So I pick up the forms and I go and I take them back to the embassy. And the lady's there and she receives them and she checks and she's like, oh, everything is good now. Okay, come back tomorrow. I leave the embassy and I call him and I'm like, yeah, they received my application and they told me to come back tomorrow. He's like, okay, go home and rest. I'm like, wait, what happened here? And then the next morning, the guy calls me and he says, you don't have to go to the embassy. I have your passport. I'm like, what? He says, just come to my office with the rest of my money and you can pick your passport.
Excuse me. Yeah.
And I'm blown away. I'm just wondering, I'm like, what is happening here? Is this even real? Is this a real visa he's talking about? But I knew where I left my passport. I'm like, I left it at the embassy. So if he has it, there must be something that is right about the visa.
But I
So,
mean, you're from Africa. I mean, I'm from Africa. Like, I know we're
yeah,
from different parts of Africa, but there's so much corruption in Africa. Surely you had surely you weren't so, like, do you know what I mean? Like, you saying what? Like that. I mean, I get it, I suppose, when you're in it when you're in it yourself, but I mean, there is always this almost expectation that there's going to be, or can be, issues,
yeah.
corruption, delays. Like, that's Africa.
Now, this is the thing. I have heard about corruption. I had people talking about all of it.
Yeah.
Maybe but I had never experienced something like this.
Yeah.
I mean, to see something like this play out at this level, right in front of my eyes, I was just blown away.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay. So we went and I gave him his money and he's like, okay. Then he gives me the passport. I check the visa and I'm like, it looks legitimate. I go to my friends with my bag, just with my backpack, my Bible, everything. And I'm like, guys, you know what? I'm leaving tomorrow. And they're like, there you go again.
Yeah.
There you go again. So I show them the passport, they say, oh, you even got a new passport. So I show them the visa and they're like, wait, is this real? When did you get this? I'm like, yesterday. They're like, Kenneth. So they just, they were skeptical about it. I'm like, well, this is it. I just had to let you guys know. In the morning, I get on the road with my mom, and she goes with me to the airport, and I get on a plane with my rucksack.
Mm.
Basically, just and then I went like when I submit my passport at the embassy, I'm like second guessing. I'm like, then these guys are just checking this visa. They're like, they put these things on their eyes. They're just looking through it. I'm like,
Mm.
my heart is pumping, but I'm like, I know where I left my passport. I don't know what happened, but I know where I left my passport. So they
Mm.
check the visa and they're like, oh, it's good. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I get on the plane.
But did you have you still have to have your passport though? You've got a
Yes.
visa, but was the visa in your passport?
Yes. So they gave me
Yeah.
back my passport and everything.
Okay. Yeah.
I paid my ticket. I got a ticket, and I'm on the plane,
Yeah.
and we went through Dubai and then to Germany. And then when I got to Germany, I got on a train to Amsterdam because my brother
Mm.
was living here. And for me, this was when I realized I couldn't go to the States. My next best option was the Netherlands.
Yeah.
But I get here and I'm like, this is it. I've arrived and could just go find a university, apply to just study and get a job. And then he's like, no, it doesn't work like that. You're here on a short stay visa. Basically, with your visa, you only arrived. If you want to leave here, your visa is for 2 weeks. If you choose to overstay your visa, then you need to have to be integrated into the system to apply for
Yeah.
asylum. And I'm like, asylum? What is that? And I was in school, and basically, I mean, I was educated, but I just didn't know like these whole things. So he explains the whole thing to me. Yeah, you have to apply to be integrated into the Dutch culture to be as a refugee. I'm like, a refugee? I'm not a refugee. They're like,
Well, yeah, you can't just move over to Holland. You
yeah,
can't just move there.
yeah.
But you didn't know that at the
No, I
time.
didn't. I didn't.
Oh,
And I'm like, how come nobody told me this?
yeah.
I'm like, maybe they actually tried to tell me, but I couldn't listen.
Yeah.
Maybe they tried to tell me, and I just my ears were just black deaf to it. And then
Mm.
I started to reflect on my dad's situation at that point, to realize why he went for so long and he was not able to come back. And that's when I start to piece the things together to understand, okay, there was all of these things. And I'm like, okay, I'm here now. And so I make up a story that I'm a refugee, I cannot go back to Uganda, and I go to the immigration police
Mm.
and I say I need help, and so I just got rid of my passport at that point because
You
I
got rid of
realized,
it.
yeah,
Oh, I see, because you're coming as an asylum. Yeah, but you wouldn't have been allowed on the plane though.
no, I have already reached in the Netherlands now.
Yeah, but why get rid of your passport?
Because if they have my passport, then they have reason to take me back where I'm coming from.
Oh, oh,
So for me, the thing was, when I got here and I realized I wanted to stay here,
yeah.
in my mind, I thought the first thing I have to do, because once I
Mm.
realized that the passport I have is useless unless I want to go back to Uganda,
Mm.
I was like, I don't need this right now.
So that's quite clever. if you want to move to a country, so just sort out your visa and then lose your passport when you're there.
It's a,
Right.
I mean, I was like, what am I doing? But so I went and told the
But you knew what you were
immigration.
doing. Come on, you're an intellectual guy. Your dad is a clever guy. I mean, he ran his own coffee plantation. You're not stupid. I mean, you
E-
definitely you knew
Exactly.
what you were doing.
I later I realized, okay, that this is how it's playing out. But
Yeah.
honestly speaking, getting to the Netherlands for me, I was like, okay, I arrive and settle and everything is all right.
Mm.
Yep. I start to work, but then I realized the papers I have are useless because if I need to stay here, I need to have legal recognition as a resident
Yeah.
here. And once I realized that that's what I needed, I thought up in my mind, okay, then the wise thing to do is get rid of this.
Mm.
And then I went to the police and they said, okay, then the only way we can help you is send you to the Asylum Seeker Center. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, this is going to take 2 weeks max, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, a month. I get there and I'm at the reception center for 2 weeks. I haven't spoken to anyone, haven't had an interview.
But you were staying
Eh,
with your brother.
no. So when I arrived, I stayed with my brother for a couple of days and then I went to the Asylum Seeker Center.
Mm.
My brother, I couldn't stay with my brother because he was also in his own procedure at the time. I'm waiting there for 2 weeks, and then after 2 weeks, they send me to a waiting center, and I wait there for
Yeah.
3 months. I've still not had an interview. I've not spoken to anyone.
Do you sleep on the floor or where do you sleep? Like, what is.
So the reception center, it's they give you, uh, you have a bed. You have, they give you meals. You have 3 square meals a day. You get. Uh,
Do you have your own room?
no, you share. There was a shared
Yeah.
arrangement, sort of like
Okay.
a dormitory.
Yeah.
There was 6 beds in it, and so there's people from all over the world, all over all
Mm-hmm.
sorts of backgrounds.
Mm.
And when I am there, so I'm like, okay, when I realize this is going to take more than a month, I'm like, what have I got myself into? What have I got myself into? And looking, so when they take me, and it's 3 months later, they send me a letter to go for my first interview.
Yeah.
And during the first interview, it lasted about 8 hours. And they were just asking me all sorts of questions. And I just made up a story because I realized if I tell them the truth, it's just not going to work to my advantage. I made up a story, I lied. And it's not something I'm proud of, but that's just what happened. And
So, what
so
was the
they,
story?
so I said, yes, I was at university. I was involved in activities that were with an opposition political party, and because of that, I couldn't live in Uganda because I felt my life was threatened, and I just wanted to be away and to be safe. And they were like, "Yeah, okay,
Meanwhile, you were this spoiled boy taking your dad's $400 and drinking it up and partying and.
exactly." Uh,
Yeah.
so I so they start asking me all these questions during the interview. They're like, "Okay, so you said this here, and then now you're telling us this. So which is it?" I'm like, "Yeah, I have a headache."
Mm.
Because I just got myself locked in a web of lies. And for me, I realized if you tell the truth, you don't have to remember anything because the
Yes, of
truth is the
course.
truth. And I just
Mm.
learned this the hard way because with every lie I told, I had to tell another lie to cover up the lie. And before
Mm.
I knew it, I was
Mm.
locked in this web. And by the time I finished the first interview, I was sick to my stomach. I knew that what I'd done was wrong. And I just wanted an opportunity to just right my wrong, to correct it. But I was like, I'll find a way to just make it right. But then in a way, I was scared. I'm like, if I tell them the truth, then it's over. What's going to happen? I decide to just wait. I'm like, let me just look for my opportunity. So they send me to an asylum seeker center now. I'm from the
Mm-hmm.
waiting center. They send me to an asylum seeker center. And at the waiting center, you get your own. So you have your own room. So it's a bit better. You get a weekly allowance. You can buy your own food. You can cook your own meals. You can clean your own place. And so basically, there's a bit of freedom, but still, you're
Yeah.
supposed to be at the center every day. You're not allowed to work. You're not allowed to study, but you're just there
Yeah.
waiting.
Yeah.
And and I waited there for 2 years. So after 1 year, they called me and they said, you have to come for your second interview. Obviously, now I have a lawyer who had been assigned to me by the government. So the lawyer called me. They say we have to do corrections with your interview to check everything to see that what you said is what they wrote and this and that and that. And after we finished with the first interview, we did the second interview after 1 year. And they go back to the things that I said in the first interview. They say, you told us in the first interview that this happened.
Mm.
And I have totally forgotten. So I'm just going again all sorts of rounds and just making up things. That was for 7 hours with breaks in between,
Mm.
but it lasted 7 hours. And after the interview, they said, okay. And then another year waiting at the center. And
Mm.
then after 2 years, they say, we have checked your application and we have concluded we don't think you're a refugee. So you have to either appeal your decision, the decision that we have made, by providing us with new facts or circumstances, or you have 10 days to leave the Netherlands.
Gosh. And now by this point, you'd been there for 2 years.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
like, two
Kenneth,
years.
just give me 2 seconds. Sorry, I can hear that there's a vacuum cleaner in
Yeah.
the other. Just give me a sec, because this thing. Are you picking it up on your side? Anyway, it doesn't
Likely.
matter. It won't sound nice in the thing. Just give me 2 seconds. I'm going to quickly tell them to turn it off. Hold on a
All
sec.
right.
Okay, sorry about that. So,
It's all right.
so they said you've got to leave in 2 weeks.
Yes. And they said, if you don't, you either appeal the decision or you leave in 2 weeks.
Yeah,
So I am panicking. I call my
yeah,
lawyer and he says, do you have any new facts or circumstances that we can use to appeal your decision?
yeah,
And I go and see him and I'm like, basically, I have nothing. I've given you everything that I have. And he's like, yeah, if this is it, then there's something like I had a file by that point. It was like this big. So what he
mm,
did, it was on his desk. He picked it up and then he just dropped it on the ground. Boop. And then it just made this very loud sound. Doop. And he's like, well, if you have nothing, then there's nothing I can do for you. I was like, is that it?
mm,
Yeah, he says, yeah, just prepare yourself. You have to leave. And I'm like, I've been here for 2 years waiting. 2 years. And I'm like, why did it have to take this long? And now I have to go. And he's like, yeah, I can't help you with this. So he actually said, if you have no facts, new facts, I can't represent you anymore
yeah,
because this is the end of your case. So he just dropped my case. I went to the refugee office and asked for another lawyer, and they assigned me another lawyer, and they asked me the same question, and I said, I have
mm,
nothing. And he said, okay, I will represent you, but just prepare your mind to either leave or you're going to be locked up.
yeah,
So 10 days later, no, after the application, the lawyer confirmed that there was no way for the appeal to be made.
mm,
He submitted that to the IND, the immigration office, and they responded and they said, well, you have exhausted your options to be able to appeal, you have to now leave within 10 days from today. I'm like, I just sat there thinking, I'm like, what have I got myself into?
Had you been seeing your brother in the meantime? What you must have been socializing with him, and I mean, life must have still been good in those 2 years.
Basically, it was just waiting at the center because you are supposed to be there. If you are at the reception center, the asylum seeker center, and for whatever reason, they could just drop in any time and ask for you. If you are not there, you have to explain why you are not there. If you, for
But
example,
can't
have
you
a
go
lunch,
out to the shops or to visit or have a
yes,
social life or anything?
yes, to go out to the shops, that's you can do that. But like
Mm,
my brother was living on the other side of the country,
mm,
and thinking about going to see him, it was we did meet every now and then, but not as much as I would have liked.
yeah.
But the whole arrangement was you were supposed to be at the center. We had to check in every week. But if, for example, you have an appointment with the lawyer, they know where you are and you have communicated this. They give
Mm.
you a transport card and you have to confirm that you went and you came back and all of this.
Okay, so you need to do you have to check in and check out when you're at the center or
Yeah, so it's called stamping. Like
yeah.
you because they would give us there's a card that they give.
Mm.
It's like it's called a W document, a V document. Um, it's like an identity card. It just has your name and your date of birth and details, just to show who you are. And then
Mm.
every week on a Tuesday morning or in the afternoon, you just have to like go to the center, to the reception, put in your card and then your thumbprint. And basically, the system registers that you are where you're supposed to be, which is at the
Okay, yeah.
asylum seeker
Yeah.
center.
And
And
tell
so,
me, how did your dad get to America?
um, so in the earlier years, in the 80s, it was different. If you could just arrange to have your ticket, for example, uh, you could go. So he arranged and he left in 89. I was young at the time. I didn't know
Mm.
much about what I just know is he left. And from what I
Yeah,
understood,
and because when did you try? You went into when was it 2007 that you tried to
yeah,
go?
yes,
So that was, yeah, so that was after the 9/11 also. So
yeah,
then there was a lot more security and
yeah,
that's why they were a lot more particular with any foreigners coming in. Okay.
yeah.
All right. So then when you now went to the Netherlands, I mean, you went through this process, but the Netherlands doesn't have such a strict, I mean, you could have gone to visit. Why did you have to go through this whole rigmarole with this guy? And why didn't you just go and book a trip?
Um, so for me, like the thing that I wanted the most was to just
Mm,
experience the world. Like I told you when I was at home, even my friends used to call me international. They're
mm.
like,
Yeah.
there he is, Mr. International. And
Yeah.
and I was always just thinking about traveling the world and just being in a different place other than Uganda. I just felt like
Mm,
my future involved living somewhere else other than Uganda. So when I got on that plane, I had a 2 weeks visa. In my mind, it was already made up. I'm not coming back to Uganda the way I've left.
mm.
Not like this. I'm just going to go and make something out of this opportunity. And it's with that mindset that I reach and I realize your papers are useless here and you just have to get rid of them if you are going to have to stay here. Because
Mm.
if, and that's where I find myself. So they say the application is rejected, and then 7 days into the 10, It was a Tuesday morning because I know that we were supposed to stamp that afternoon at the Asylum Seeker Center. At 7 o'clock in the morning, I hear a knock on my door. I've just been there waiting. I don't know what's happening. Just food has lost its taste. Bright colors all of a sudden just seem dull, and the things that matter just don't make sense anymore. I'm like, this is. But I made up my mind. I'm like, if I've waited for 2 years. I've not just waited to just walk away from this. I have to see how this ends. I have to just play it all out. They picked me up at 7 o'clock in the morning. I asked, who is it? They said, immigration police. Open. I'm like, my heart just sunk.
Yeah.
I opened the door and they said, as of this point, your application has been rejected for asylum and your options for appeal have been exhausted. So as of this point, you are illegal in the Netherlands. So first of all, give us the W document, the card that we gave you. They took it from me and they said, you are coming with us. And I asked, where are we going? They said, we go to the police station, because I was living in Zeist. No, the Asylum Seeker Center was in Winterswijk. Yes. They took me to the police station in Dottingham. For Dutch people, I think you understand exactly
Yeah, but
the location.
well, you can explain it to people who are in America now who don't know Holland.
Yes. So it's about 20 minutes from the Asylum Seeker Center where I was living. They said the police station is about 20 minutes away. And while I'm going to be waiting there to speak to my lawyer, and then from there, I will be taken to a detention center. I'm like, am I in a dream? Is this really happening? And I just cooperate. I'm like, because I realize, I mean, they're there. It's immigration police. They have the guns, the handcuffs and everything. And I'm like, if I try to resist this, it could just go the wrong way.
Yeah, definitely.
So I cooperate.
Like, absolutely, 100% it will go the wrong way.
So I'm in full cooperation. They say, stand. I say, stand. They walk this way, I walk that way. And so I pick up my bag. 2 years, you've gathered up some things. So I just left everything else. I just packed my bag with my clothes and my most valuable things. And I went to the police station. And at the police station, I called my lawyer and he came. And then we just had a conversation. It's like, so basically what is happening is you are here because of what I told you, that the application was denied and there's no appeal that was made.
Yeah.
You either have to leave or you are going to be locked up. Then he told me about this document that I had to sign for the Department of Departure and Repatriation to be able to secure a temporary visa, like a laissez-passer. It's called a temporary travel document. It's a one-way passport, basically, that they could use to deport me to Uganda.
Yeah.
But in order for them to get that one-way document, I needed to sign that I accept for that document to be issued to me. And when I realized that Uganda does not accept anybody to be deported unless they have agreed or consented to it, I said, I don't want to go. And they said, yeah, basically, if you don't want to go, you're going to be locked up. So he showed me the document, and I'm like, okay, I see the form, but it's not what I want. He said, if you don't sign the form, they're going to lock you up. Later on, I was transported to Zeist. which is near Utrecht, around the middle of the Netherlands. That's where the detention center is. And when I get there, I'm like, just now I'm in a completely different frame of mind. I'm like, I don't know what I got myself into. My idea was to have an experience of the world, and this this looked like a very intense experience. I'm like, so at the detention center, the just from the first day, the intake alone, I'd never spoken about this too. So I get there and they say, all right, put your bags aside and then first sort out some clothes that you're going to be using. They say, you can take that, leave everything else behind. And they put it in a different blue bag and they keep my other bag. I'm like, okay, what's happening? I'm still not clear about what's going on. Then they say, walk into that room. And then when I walk into the room, they say, there's two men in the room. And they say, all right, we have to check you before you go inside the detention center because we don't know what you're bringing with you. And this is a detention center. You just can't bring anything with you. So we have to check to make sure you're not bringing drugs or anything that you're not supposed to be bringing in. I'm like, you can check. And he's like, no, remove your clothes. I'm like, what? And they were just standing there. Two men came in because there was two men in the front and then two men came in from the back.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
four of them inside. And they're putting on gloves and everything. So I'm like, I realize if I don't cooperate, they'll make me. And that's the last thing I wanted. So I'm like, oh, right. So I just remove all my clothes. And then they're like, yeah, okay, you have to make 3 squats while coughing to just make sure that you have not concealed anything within yourself. And when I finish to do that, they say, okay, you can wear this. So they give me like a gown, like the ones that people wear for when you're in a psych ward, for like when you're in a hospital, for example. So they just gave me something like that, and then they explained, so what's going to happen? You're going to be evaluated for the next 24 hours to make sure that you're mentally stable to be in this place. So they put me in an observation room. There was a camera there, and basically there was a bed on the floor, and an aluminum toilet in the corner, and an intercom on there. And the door was locked, and they said, if you need anything, just ring the intercom and we'll come. And basically, to even flush the toilet, you have to ring the intercom. And the purpose of it was to evaluate, to make sure that I was mentally stable enough to be in a detention center. But this whole experience alone was almost enough to destabilize someone mentally.
Yeah. Yeah.
I cried myself to sleep. I just couldn't believe what I was experiencing, what I had got myself into. And I was there just tossing and turning. I asked for my Bible. I was just there reading it and just praying and crying and crying and reading and praying and crying. And they brought me some food and I just couldn't eat. And then 24 hours later, a psychiatrist comes. They just open the door and he asks, he asks, can I come in? I'm like, yes, please. So he asks, do you know why you're here? I'm like, yes, I was told because I'm being evaluated to make sure I'm mentally stable to be in this place. And he's like, are you okay? I told him, yes, I am okay. Uh, it's like, okay, that's all that I needed. You can dress up and then your transport is ready. So I dress up, they give me my clothes, I dress up, and then the van is waiting like a prison transport van.
Mm.
It's waiting outside, and they drive me to a different block where the detention center was. And then they give me a blue bag of the clothes that I had sorted earlier. The other belongings of mine remained in keeping. I get into the center and I'm like, okay, I don't know what's happening here, but I'm here. And in my mind, I thought, what's the worst thing that could happen here? I thought I could get in trouble and I could get killed in this place. The other thing that I thought that could happen is I could be just deported. And I mentally took myself to that place and accepted that if that's what happens, I'm okay with it.
Mm.
And I went in and got a room. There was 2 beds in it. Nobody else was there, and I was just in the room. Basically, you have 1 hour of sunlight, 30 minutes in the morning and 30 minutes in the afternoon. The rest of the time you're inside, you have 30 minutes of sports activity. Maybe you can go to the gym or to outside to play some football, something like that. And there was like a phone, a telephone. You could buy telephone cards. Then I called my mom and I told her where I was. And she just couldn't believe it. She was like, what have you got yourself into? Is it because of something wrong you've done? I'm like, no, it's not because of a crime I've committed. It's just because of my immigration status. And she's like, okay, you're in prison now. Because from what you explained, that's what it sounds like.
Mm.
I'm like, it's a detention center. She's like, no, you are in prison. I had to come to terms with that. And then I just realized, okay, this is where I am. The first days were tough, but I realized I have to be strong for myself and that I have to make something out of this. So I just like tried to just find something else that I could hold on to. And one time I'm in the detention center. I was actually coming from the gym. I see a poster somewhere on one of the walls. And on the poster, it was written, what would you think if I told you that everything that has happened in your life has had a part to play in you ending up here? And what would you say if I told you that right here, right now, is exactly where you're supposed to be in order for a future that you cannot even start to think about to come into play for you?
Mm.
I looked at that statement. I don't know who put it there,
Mm.
but I looked at it and it's like it had been put there for me.
Mm.
I thought about all the choices, all the things that I had done to get myself to this point, the
Yeah.
mistakes, all the recklessness and the trouble that I caused.
Mm.
And I had to own that I had brought myself to this place.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
until that point, I was blaming. It was either my dad's fault, he wasn't around. It was the government's fault, I didn't have the opportunities I needed. It was the IND's fault, they didn't give me the passport or the residence. Or it was somebody else's. And I had this long list of blame. And that statement alone got me to realize that it's not any of that,
Mm.
that it's me. And I broke down. I realized that I had to own it. Everything. I forgave the past. I realized that it's not anybody's fault. I got myself into this. And I just started to search within myself to see what else was there. And I
Mm.
realized I have an opportunity to make something out of my life. But right in the detention center, I was like, okay, what can I do here? We started a prayer group that we just would meet with other people, just encourage each other.
Was it a jail or was it a detention center? I mean, I know it was like a jail because it was a jail. I mean,
Yeah.
effectively it was a jail, but was it in Holland, was it classified as a jail or a detention center?
Um, it is called a detention center. Yeah.
Okay, so it is
But
labeled that, yeah.
yes, but let me just explain this. Like sometimes there's people in the Netherlands, for example, you have immigration status as a migrant, and then you commit a crime. And because of the crime you commit, you lose your immigration status. So they
Yes,
put
okay.
you in the criminal prison. After you serve your criminal sentence, you are brought into the detention center. I spoke to people who were in that situation and they were like, I would rather be back into the criminal prison. They said, this is not
Why?
life. You have no
But what's the
rights.
difference? What's the difference between the criminal prison and the detention center?
So for me, I didn't experience the criminal aspect of the prison the criminal prison. So I just cannot compare it for myself. But from what they told me, they're like, what is happening here? I would rather be back the other side. That the conditions for them, they said, this is just, this is worse. It's just this
In terms of hygiene or in terms of what food you get, in terms of how many daylight
restrictions,
hours? Yeah.
restrictions, and I think also with rights, maybe because they were talking a lot about that. And it's like,
Didn't a lot of people go crazy around you in that situation? Because it is different to when you've committed a crime, right? I mean, I recently interviewed someone who was put in jail for not committing a crime, but anyway, that's a whole other conversation. You can hear his interview, Jeffrey
yeah,
Deskovic, but he's out now. But I mean, doesn't, especially in your situation where it's this sort of refugee trying to escape from, but you weren't trying to escape. I mean, you always had dreams. You were
yeah,
trying to follow a dream. You weren't trying
yeah,
to escape. But
yeah,
but my question in that was, don't people go insane like
yes,
around you? But so is that a yes? Did you see people losing the plot?
yes. With my own eyes, I saw men break. So I was in the detention center. After 2 weeks in the detention center, I got an appointment to go to court and see, to appear before a judge. And my lawyer came and the lawyer for the government. And basically, the case that was presented was that my application was denied, my options were exhausted, and I had to leave. And because of that, I was not, excuse me, I wasn't cooperating to be deported. And because of that, they needed me to sign this form for them to get the temporary travel document to deport me, but I had not
Yeah,
cooperated. So the judge
yeah.
asked me, he said, do you know about this? And I said, yes, I know. My lawyer told me about the document that I need to sign. And he asked me, why haven't you signed it? I told him, because I don't want to go. I don't want to go back to Uganda like this. And he said, okay, I understand. And I cannot force you to do something you don't want. But there is a law here that if you have exhausted your options for immigration, the government is allowed up to 18 months, 1 year and a half, to hold you in the process of deporting you. But if they cannot do that in 10 months, they would not be able to do it in 1 year and a half. So I'm giving them 10 months to do this. And if they cannot deport you in 10 months, then they have to let you go. And when I
What do you
realized,
mean? I don't understand that.
okay, let me explain. So when I was arrested, the IND, the government, could keep me in detention for up to 18 months, 1 year and a
Yeah,
half,
yeah.
in the process of deporting me. And whatever happens in that in the time of 18 months, I would be, so if I would, within that month, the time of 18 months, sign the document, then they would get the travel document and then deport me. So the judge said, I'm giving the IND 10 months instead of 18.
Okay.
So if they cannot deport you in 10 months, they have to let you go.
Let you go meaning?
To be free from the detention center.
So then you can be free in Holland.
Free but illegal, yes, basically. Because I would not be like detained again.
Yeah.
So once I understood that, I was like, okay. And then every month, I would get a visit from the people from the Department of Departure and Repatriation. And they would come and have a meeting with me. They're like, yeah, okay, so what's happening? What are you doing here? And how is your life? Are you being treated well? What are your plans for the future? Because now you're just sitting here, you're doing nothing, you're wasting your life. Why don't you just sign this document and then you can go? And in my mind, I'm like, no, that's not what I want. And then he would be like, okay, but if you're okay, then he would come back again the next month. Just disappointments with him. And one time he came and was like, yeah, so what are your plans for the future? What are your dreams? And I realized basically what he was doing was like patronizing me.
Yeah.
I'm like, look, I understand you have a job to do. Because he said, if I put myself in your position, I would just sign this. And I told him, look, I understand your position, that you have a job to do. But with all due respect, you have never been on this side of the table. You don't know what it feels like to be a migrant. You were born here. So let's not talk about you being in my shoes. They're too big for you. I respect that you have a job to do, but don't tell me that if you were in my position. Because you can't. And it's like, so what are your plans for the future? I'm like, you're not my life coach. Do your job and just let me be.
Did you really say that to him?
I told him. And
Did you say you're not my life coach?
I told him because he was asking me about my plans.
Serious?
Yeah.
Were you?
And
Yeah.
I saw he was starting to get red in the face. So I just shut up. And then the next time I had an appointment, somebody else came. He didn't come again.
But tell me something. I mean, you got on the plane in your mind's eye knowing I'm going for good. Like that's what you thought.
No, not for good. I'm going, but not coming back the way I left.
Yeah, you're going to go and see how it goes, but you never thought, so, okay, maybe because I've traveled so much and I am South African and I've faced the same sort of visa restrictions. Although I've got British and Dutch roots in me, I still had to anyway get the passport because I only started traveling after 18. So then I wasn't actually in the jurisdiction of my parents anymore. So I had to work to then get it, but obviously I could get in on ancestral visas and that sort of thing. But we always knew like you either got 3 months or you got 6 months or so you always knew you got that timestamp. But did you not know that you had that timestamp?
The timestamp that I had in the visa that I got was for 2 weeks.
Yes, I know that now. But did you not know that when you got on the plane?
No.
So
no, I didn't.
So then why were you so hard-headed? I mean, why? It's not like you would be going back with your tail between your legs. Why were you so hard-headed to stay? I mean, to live in the way you were? Or was it also that you were just kind of, you were curious in a way of where this was going to go?
So for me, I was like, I've not wasted 2 years of my life to just walk away from this. I was like, I just have to know how this all ends.
But even
There's,
in that 2 year period, when you were living in an asylum situation,
yeah,
I mean, that's also not glamorous. But I mean, were you, and in your situation, based on your story, it's not glamorous, right? And one could even say that. But
yeah,
for people that literally are leaving a country because there's war and
yeah,
there is genuine like danger, which I
yeah,
don't think that, you weren't running from that. You were just running
yeah,
towards a dream.
yeah.
So
For me,
surely you were thinking, this is like, what am I doing? Or was it like this young 23, 24-year-old thinking, I'm interested, I'm kind of curious in all of this?
yeah, exactly. So for me, it was, I was running towards a dream indeed. And the the thing that drove me is, there's a thing that I live my life by is, and I picked it up during that time. Let me see what happens if I don't give up.
Mm,
Let me just see what happens. And that's just one of the things that I even live my life by this day, to this day.
yeah.
But I just picked it up from this whole experience. So I'm in the detention center. When I realize I'm going to be there for 10 months, I see people coming in 1 month, 2 months, and I see that somebody's starting to like talk to himself while they're walking. And they start screaming and they start banging walls, and then they're taken away in isolation. And then you don't hear or know anything that happens to them. And we realized we needed to do something to just help. Because after this experience that I had with the poster that I told you about, I spoke to some of my other friends who were there, and we started a prayer group just to encourage each other. And because sometimes people would come and within 2 weeks they're deported, and
Mm,
then, but we just made sure that if somebody had to leave, at least they didn't leave with uh, their hearts broken, that
mm,
they would live encouraged to know that there is hope and there is a better, another door that is waiting to open because
mm,
this has been closed. And I started to search within myself to realize that I was actually an encourager, that I just had this interest in people, just listening to voices and just seeing faces and understanding the things that are going on in people's hearts.
mm,
And so I just made myself available to just speak to people and listen to them. And it gave me peace, but also like gave me something to run by, just to have
mm,
something to live for. So I would be thinking, sitting in my cell, I'm like, whose cell can I go to today? When they open in the morning, who can I visit this morning?
yeah.
And then I would just go and like, hey, how is it going? And they're like, yeah, I don't know what's happening. My lawyer told me they got the temporary visa travel document, and I think I'm going to be deported. I don't know what's happening. I'm like, man, I can understand. That's tough. It's but what are your plans? Is like, I don't know. I don't know. I have this and I have that, and basically we're just talking about things like that. And after this whole experience, it just went on like this. And I just got comfortable with just being in this situation. And it's just fascinating how you can just be in the wrong place and get comfortable.
Mm,
And sometimes the place that we are used to is not the place that we belong. And for me, I saw this firsthand for myself, that the day came, and in the evening I was just coming from outside, and one of the guards said, "We received a fax from the court. You're supposed to be released tomorrow." I
mm,
panicked. I panicked. I'm like, what am I going to do? Where am I going to go? I don't know what to do. I don't know. And I'm like, let me just stay here because I just got used. But I'm like, I don't belong here.
yeah.
Yeah. And so I sat down that night and I thought, I'm like, what am I going to do? Then I remembered one of my friends. He had told me, if you ever get released and you need help, because he was also in the detention center, but he said, if you ever get released and you need help, call me. So I called him. I'm like, hey man, I've been told that I can be free to go tomorrow, but
Mm-hmm.
basically I have nowhere to go.
Yeah.
At this time, my brother has already gone back to Uganda because he was also in the same procedure and it didn't work. And for him, rather than being locked up,
He signed the papers.
no, he didn't sign the papers. He didn't wait to be arrested. He just ran away from the detention center, went and figured out
Mm.
what he needed to figure out for himself, living by himself, and then eventually he arranged and went back to Uganda. And
On
so,
his own.
yes. So I'm
Yeah.
like, when I call my friend and he's like, his name is Steven, and I'm forever grateful. He says, you can come and live with me. I have a place in The Hague. You can come and live with me until you get
Mm-hmm.
on your feet. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
okay. So they give me a card, and then when I go to check out, they give me all my belongings and with my bag, and then they give me a yellow document that came from the court that the judge sent with it, with my
Mm-hmm.
release, that it just
Mm-hmm.
shows that I have been in detention because my procedure was exhausted, but that I had to leave the Netherlands,
Mm.
but there was no specific date when I had to leave
Mm-hmm.
on that document. Some people got those documents and it said that you had to leave within 10 days
Yeah.
for after the detention. So it said I had to leave, but it didn't
Mm.
say when.
Yeah.
So they gave it to me. I'm like, what is this? And they were laughing. They were like, yeah, that's your passport. The guards.
Really.
And
Yeah.
I'm like, okay. I didn't understand at first what he was talking about because I thought. Then later it just sunk in me that I don't have any identity card or any document with me, just this yellow paper.
Yeah.
And then when the police would stop me, maybe there's a control and they're just checking. They
Mm.
say, uh, they ask uh, ID, passport.
Yeah.
I would give them this yellow paper, and they
Mm.
were like, "No, we want your passport." I'm like, "This is what I have,"
Yeah.
and it actually happened several times. And then they would check, like make calls because there's contacts on it. And when they would call, they're like, "Yeah, okay." They would give it back to me, and they say, "Leave you have to leave the Netherlands." That's what they were telling me. But I wasn't a criminal or doing anything wrong. I was just looking for something to do for myself. And this friend of mine was going to a church in Leiden at the time.
Mm.
Uh, so the church is connected to, he's from Nigeria, and the church it's originally a Nigerian church. It's called the Redeemed Christian Church of God,
Mm-hmm.
and it has branches all over the world. In The Hague, there is a branch, but they were setting up a branch in Leiden as well, in a city that
Mm-hmm.
is about 30 minutes from The Hague.
Mm.
And so he was part of the branch that was being set up in Leiden. And so they would go to the church in The Hague, and then the bus would take them to Leiden. And he said, let's go to church together. And we did that. When I came to Leiden, the pastor took a liking to me because I was in a detention center, and all I did, I think I read the Bible for like 3 or 4 hours every day.
Mm.
We did a lot of praying, and that just soaked into me. Yes, I was a Christian already, but this whole experience, and the way I like to say it is, I went into this whole experience as a boy and I came out as a man. That I didn't need to hear it from anyone. When I got out of
Mm.
that detention center, I knew that I was a better version of myself
Mm.
than when I went in, because I was now thinking about how can I be of service to other people. It was not so much about my own life anymore, my own interest or the things that I wanted to get out of life. And I got this idea while I was in the detention center to write a book actually about this. And the book is written, it's published, it's called Opening Up, The Strength You Need to Persevere. This is it. I'll send you a copy of it.
Amazing. Yeah. What's it called? Opening up.
Yes, Opening Up, The Strength You Need to Persevere.
Cool.
Yeah. So I realized there was something here. And basically in the book, I just tell everything as it is. And when I went to the church, the pastor took a liking to me and it was like, tell me about yourself. I told him all of it because in my mind, I was looking for an opportunity to right my wrong. What I promised myself, I'm not leaving the Netherlands until I get an opportunity to correct this, to correct the lies that I told. So when people started asking me, I told the pastor everything and it was like, okay,
Yeah.
what have you been doing in the meantime? I told him, yeah, I've been just praying and reading. And he's like, okay, lead us in prayer this morning. And I was like, oh, wait, didn't you just hear what I told you? And he's like, no, just lead us in prayer this morning. And I just did it. And it was the first time somebody saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And then a couple of weeks
And
later,
what was that? What was that? What would you describe that to be?
he saw a leader in me. He saw my potential, he didn't see where I was, but he saw something else in me that I just maybe even didn't see myself at the time. So when I finished to lead the prayer, another week he asked me to do the same thing again. And around that time, there was, because the life of the city, Leiden, is centered a lot around the university, Leiden University. So there's people coming in and going out. There's a Bible class that they were doing every Sunday morning. And the person who was doing the class was here on a master's program. And he had finished his master's program and he had gone back. Then the pastor asks me, I've heard you talk about the Bible, and I think you know a lot and you are admitting. What do you think about starting to lead the Bible class, to teach the Bible class? I'm like, I've never done that before. He's like, I know, but I've heard you talk about the Bible. And I think you have something to share. There's material that we can give you and everything, but there's something you can share. So I'm like, okay. And I started to do that. And people just took a liking to the class and it was just going very well. And basically that's just what I did. And through this connection in the church, he asked me, so what do you do during the day? I'm like, yeah, I'm just sitting at home. I don't have anything to do. He's like, what would you like to do? I'm like, yeah, but I'm not allowed to work. And even when he was asking me about the volunteer to do the things, I'm like, yeah, you're just volunteering, so you're not working.
Yeah.
Then he was like, if I get somebody who needs your help, can I give them your number? So I'm like, yes. So because, like Nigeria and Shell, there's a big connection with the Netherlands. So many people come from Nigeria all continually for contracts to work with Shell. And so they always need like somebody to just help them out with some things. Going to IKEA, buying all furniture, coming home, putting it together, and then all things like that. So one time he calls me. He's like, there's a friend of mine who's leaving for Nigeria. He works with Shell, but he just needs help with putting together some things and then shipping them in a container. Can you help with that? I'm like, yeah. So I went and spent the whole day with him. And we didn't talk about payment or anything. And then in the evening, he gives me €100. I'm like, what? I left the place and then he's like, come back tomorrow. And then I went back tomorrow and he's like, yeah, so you worked also today 10 hours. It gives me another €100. And I did that for like 3 days, and he gave me €100 each day. And then he left. 2 weeks later, the person who came as his replacement, he gave him my number. And he called me also. He says, yeah, I need some help, furniture and things. He told me, you helped one of my friends. I'm like, yeah, I'm
Mm.
available. And the same thing happened. And so like I would
Yeah. So it's
sometimes,
so basically, because maybe also I'm understanding this quickly because I've lived there and I've got friends who even work for Shell. So it's
yeah,
like I've been to The Hague, I've been to the office. The Shell is like just such a massive company in the Netherlands, and
yeah,
well, controversial is on another spectrum of conversation, obviously with
yeah,
Shell, but just in terms, yeah, it's literally it's I think it's definitely one of the biggest expat magnet companies. So you're the one who's sort of helping these guys pack things up to go back home when their
yeah,
contract's finished, and now you're helping another guy whose contract's starting, and this is what that phone call was.
yeah. And so that goes on. And then on Sunday, I go back to church and just doing my class. And one day,
Mm.
after like about a year, I'm doing this class, and this is going on. Somebody walks into the church, and everybody knows who they are. And I didn't know them. And they were like, everybody's like, welcome back. Hey, welcome back.
Mm.
And I finished to do my class. And so I'm like, who's this? It's a Dutch girl in a Nigerian church.
Mm.
And I'm like, uh, so the first thing that she says, you're not Nigerian. And I tell her, so you are also not Nigerian.
Mm.
And then we start to laugh about that. But then and then she tells me, yeah, I've been away, was in this church, but I've been in Nigeria doing research on Pentecostal churches and this and that. And so
Hmm.
I came to this church because I just needed a connection with, and I'm like, okay, nice. And then we became friends. And then
And are
she
you
started,
speaking Dutch by this point at all, or are you speaking in
yes,
English?
no, we're speaking in English, but
Okay.
I was already like speaking some Dutch.
Yeah.
So we start to get to know each other, and then she's coming to my classes. I had another class that I was doing during the week on Wednesday evening, and then she came, and we started to just get to know each other. We became friends, and then she started asking questions. Dutch people are very direct.
Mm.
And then she started asking me all these questions, and I'm like, at first I was a bit uh, hesitant to tell her
Mm.
exactly what the situation was, but I was like,
Yeah.
what do I have to lose? I told her
Yeah.
everything. And she's like, okay. She was finishing up with a master's program at the point, and then she got a PhD program awarded. So she decided to take it up. But at this point now, we have our friendship has grown into a relationship. And for me, in my mind, I'm like, I'd already got these ideas of writing this book, and I want to just do something and apply myself. So I'm like, I have to go back to Uganda to just figure things out for myself. I've learned my lessons, and I believe there's something here for me to share with the world. I got interested in coaching at that point and helping other people. So I started to take on classes for coaching and and public speaking. And she's like, if you're going to Uganda, we're going back together. And but she said maybe we can speak to a lawyer and to see what happens. So we reached out to a migration lawyer and explained the whole situation. And he was like, yeah, you can go back to Uganda and come back because
Because now you're in a relationship.
yes,
Yeah.
he said. So we were like, yeah, and then we're concerned about all sorts of things because once you've overstayed, you get like a
Mm.
travel ban for 2 years. And he said, this is the beautiful thing with the law because if you comply and leave legally, with you will get the travel ban. Don't resist it. Just sign everything they want you to sign. But once you're in Uganda and you apply to come back, it's a different story. It's a
Yes.
different
It's a
reason
different
you're coming back.
application.
It's a different application. So in the application, they ask, have you been to the Netherlands before illegally? Yes. Have you ever told false information to the immigration authorities? And then they had a small box in the form. And I'm like, please see the email, the the letter attached on the back. So what I did is I just wrote out everything and attached it to the application and told the immigration authorities, this is who I am, this is what happened, but I'm applying again. And when I went back to Uganda, they said they need 3 months to respond to the application. And within 30 days, we got a letter that the application had been approved and that I could come back to the Netherlands to live here legally. But at this point in my mind, I've started to get on this journey to just I realized there was something else that I could give. And this is the journey that I've been on. It took me to Booking.com. I've been there serving, but I'm at a season right now that I'm focusing more on the impact that I can make with helping other people just figure out their own life journeys and situations. And also now helping other people who want to just write their own books. Because I believe that every life that's worth living is worth documenting.
Beautiful. So you kind of like this last bit, you sort of skipped ahead like really quickly because actually you've actually been there for 11 years almost, right?
Yes.
So just so I understand, so when you were at the church and you met this woman, you were still supposed to go back to Holland. You had this yellow paper you talk about. You were supposed to go back to Holland.
Yeah.
So then, how long was your relationship with this woman before you then ended up going back to
Uganda.
Uganda to visit? Yeah.
So we met, and I think we got in a relation. It was about 2 years.
But how come they never kicked you out still?
No, because I had this yellow document, the yellow paper that the court had given me, and with it, I could, the only thing that I just had to do is to stay out of trouble. If I committed a crime, I would be arrested and put in prison. But if the police would check and ask me for my documents, and I give them this paper, there was some numbers from the court that they would call, and then they would be like, yeah, we know who that is, but he's supposed to leave, and if he hasn't yet left and he's not in trouble, so they would just give me back the paper and they say, you have to leave the Netherlands. I'm like, I know, but I'm not yet ready.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you know? Have you researched this having now been in this situation? If this was in America, would they have kicked you out or is it the same procedure? Because I know things work very differently in Holland.
Yeah. I think I would have been kicked out.
Okay, but that's an assumption. You don't know for sure if that's the procedure.
No, because the reason that I was not able to be kicked out, even in the Netherlands, was because I didn't sign that document. Because at one point they even presented me before the consular officer. They brought the consular to The Hague, and they took me there, and I met the consular, and the consular asked me, so they brought me here to confirm that you're Ugandan and to issue you with a travel document. But there's this form that you need to sign in order for me to legally give them the travel document. Because if I issue this travel document without you signing for it, it's not right, and I could get in a lot of trouble for that.
Yes.
So do you want to sign the document? And I told her I am okay. I don't want to sign any document because I don't want to leave yet. And she said, if you're okay, that's all that I need to know. I will let them know. And she told them he is Ugandan, but he is not willing to sign the document, so I can't issue a travel document. And because they were not able to get the travel document, I was not able to be deported.
No, and I know that. I get that. I understand that. It's phenomenal that and that's what I'm questioning is if it's a Dutch law and a respect.
Yeah.
Because you don't sign, that they don't literally boot you out, and I'm just curious if in America, if that system works the same as if you don't sign this paper, they'll give you your space to still think
Ah,
about it. I don't know. I'm wondering. I'm just curious now. So anyone listening now, you're welcome to let us know if you know what that status is. But I'm just curious. And even in the
yeah,
UK, if
yeah,
they give you that freedom to give your permission with a signature, like that's
yeah,
crazy to me.
yeah.
So, and now, are you still with this same woman? Are you
Yes, I am.
together? Do you have
Yes, we
children?
are.
Where are you at right now?
So when we come back, we get married. We It's coming to 7 years on the
Yeah.
11th of April, and we're basically still married and happily married.
Yeah. How amazing is that, huh?
Uh, and and I applied for my Dutch citizenship and I got my Dutch passport. And so
Wow.
I now have a Ugandan passport and a Dutch passport because I'm
Mm.
allowed to have dual citizenship.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
And do you have kids?
not yet. We are working on
Okay.
that.
Cool. And now that we know you, Kenneth, we know that you're quite persistent, so it will happen.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, when I look at this entire experience, the way at first I used to say it happened to me, but now that I see what transpired, I don't say it happened to me, but I say it happened for me.
Mm.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So I'm just curious, and we're going to end off now. Um, if you had to, if you had to tell someone your story, like, hypothetically, you met someone in the street, and there was a reason that you both had no time.
Yeah.
You were running in one direction, the person was running another direction, but you maybe bumped each other, and a briefcase knocked over and you picked it up, and maybe he was the same, it looked, maybe he was from the same country as you, or there was a reason that you were like, hey, how's it, thanks so much, like, and then because of the chemistry, it was like, well, where are you from? And then you would say where you were from, and then he would say, oh gosh, I'm also from Uganda. And then, but you literally only had 5 minutes, right, to
Yeah.
tell your story and
Yeah.
to say who you are. Like, what would you say then? Like, I've heard your story in the format of a story, but I'm just curious how you would nutshell yourself.
Yeah. Wow, that's a good one. 5 minutes. I'm a lover of people, and I'm most lit up when I'm listening to voices and looking at faces. I'm fascinated by human experiences. I've had my own, having been born and raised in Uganda and now living in the Netherlands. I went through a procedure that could have broken me, but I came out of it stronger, not because of the fact that I was the wisest or the strongest, but I just refused to give up. And whatever it is that you're up against or the things that you feel are given to you in your heart to do, if you believe that they have been given to you to do, you are able to do them because life only uh, life does not give us what we deserve, but life does not give us what we want, but rather the things that we deserve. And in persisting to refuse to give up, you will achieve your dream. Commit to just stay the course. For me, the thing that helped me is to say to myself, let me see what will happen if I don't give up. And this is what keeps me going. Even on my journey right now, the thing that keeps me going is let me see what will happen if I don't give up. So believe in the beauty of your dreams. and never give up because you're worth it.
But in that 5 minutes, you still haven't told him what happened to you.
Yeah, it's yeah, having been born and raised in Uganda, I had dreams of traveling the world, and I went through several rejections. And these rejections could have pushed me to give up, but I kept looking for an opportunity, and eventually I got an opportunity to come to live in the Netherlands, and I went through a migration procedure that lasted 2 years, and it was tough, but it lasted 2 years, and after 2 years I was told that my application was rejected and that I had 10 days to leave or else I would be arrested, detained, and deported. And 7 days into the 10, I was picked up and locked up. Days felt like weeks, and weeks felt like months, and months felt like years, and I was there for 10. But this experience, that was the toughest thing that I'd ever have to go through, turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. Because I saw a poster while I was in that place that spoke to me like it had been put there for me. And it said, what would you think if I told you that everything that has happened in your life has had a part to play in you ending up here? And what would you say if I told you that right here, right now is exactly where you're supposed to be, in order for a future that you cannot start to think about to come into play for you? That one statement got me on a journey to look within myself, to see what else was there besides the confusion and the mess. And I discovered that I was an encourager, that I was passionate about people and their experiences. And I went on a journey to search and to equip myself to be able to help other people. And by doing that, I went on a journey. I eventually was released. And I had this dream of writing the book. I've written the book and published it under the title Opening Up, The Strength You Need to Persevere. And when I was released, I did do what I had to do. I didn't focus on myself because I knew, just like the back of my hand, that I was not the same person who went into that place, that I was better, that I was wiser and stronger. And I focused on serving other people. And through the process of serving other people, I met somebody else who got an interest in me, that we started a friendship that blossomed into a friendship of love. And we got married. And yes, out of that relationship, I was recognized as a resident as well. And we are happily married 6 years and counting. And whatever happens, life does not happen for us. Life does not happen to us, but rather it happens for us.
Cool. Yeah. So on closing then, in reflecting to your story in the long version and the short version, if there was like one, like just one field of energy that was driving you the whole way through this, what would you say that is? What's that called?
Oh, that's a good one. I call it perseverance. Some would
Well,
call it persistence.
perseverance was the action, but
Ah,
what was driving you?
what was driving me? I would say it's the dream. The dream that I had in my heart for a better version of myself, of making a contribution to the world, of sharing of myself with humanity.
And did it have anything to do with your dad also?
Um, In the beginning, yes, but I got to a point to realize that, like I mentioned in that place when I was in the detention center, up until that point, it had something to do with my dad. But once I got to that point, I realized that this is my experience. Nobody else is going to do it for me. This is my journey. Nobody is going to travel it for me. And I just owned up to it. And eventually, I did speak with my dad about this. We're in communication. We have a very good relationship now. And one time he said, of all my children, you're the one you've experienced things that nobody else has, even me inclusive, but you have done something with it that we have all not yet been able to do. And
Which is?
to make something out of it, to not let it be a stick with which I beat myself, yeah, but to use it as a tool to just help others.
And
And
the
with
it being? The
the experience and the whole thing that I went through, because I realized it was just not about me, but it was about, because the way I look at experience is in life we say experience is the best teacher. Uh, but when we are in school, the teachers that taught me best gave me the lessons and then afterwards the exams. And based on these exams, I got promoted to another class. Life is the exact opposite. You get the exam fast and then you learn the lesson.
yeah.
Yeah. And based on this lesson that you learn, it becomes your foundation for the next exam. But I think the experiences that life gives us, I was speaking to somebody sometime and I said, not everybody has the privilege of being a migrant. And they were fascinated that I called it a privilege. Because what I went through has actually become something that I look back to and reflect on and draw lessons from, not just for myself, but also for other people. And some people don't have the privilege of being a migrant, but they would like to learn the lessons that a migrant has learned. And
Yeah.
so that has inspired me to just be able to give this to the world. And so with the book, there's something I created. Let me see, it's here. There's a training program with it, a workbook. So this is the opening up workbook. And I just reflect on my own experience and let the person who's going through the experience just reflect on what it is that they're taking out of it. Because I believe that we all the lessons that we can learn in life are valuable, but nobody has enough time to go through all of life's experiences. That's why we have to be
Well,
willing to.
yeah, not to get what they want right now,
Yeah,
like in that way. Yeah.
yeah.
But so because we do need to close off now, I'm seeing the time, and I just want to know like where do you get it from? Like why is it that with you didn't end up being the guy hitting the wall and speaking to yourself and going around in circles in detention center, or or sign that paper and go back? Like, what is it in you that
Um,
empowered you and helped you keep going?
faith. I believe that there is a tomorrow that is brighter than today. I believed that no matter how long it takes to rain, the clouds will clear and the sun will shine. And basically,
But do
that's just
you
what kept
really?
me
Is
going.
that
Yes, I do.
really in you?
Yes, it's a. I mean, no matter how bad it is, no matter how bad it gets, it could be worse. It could
And
be
where do you
worse.
get that from?
I've reflected on through like reading and understanding other people's experiences. I realized that we don't decide the hands that life deals us, but we decide how we can play the cards that life gives us.
Mm.
And the whole difference between making it and struggling does not depend on the cards that you have been given, but how you're playing them.
Yeah, but how come some people don't know how to play the cards?
This is the thing that I mentioned, because we need all the lessons that we can learn in life. But sometimes what happens is, like I explained the situation of life experiences, if you are going through life and you get an exam, yes, and there's a lesson that you have to learn, and you refuse to
Mm.
learn this lesson, yes,
Mm. Mm.
this experience keeps coming back in the
Mm.
same, in different forms. 1 year, 2 years, you're in the same place, 3 years, 4 years. But until you accept and say, okay, this is what life is trying to teach me, and
Mm.
then you go to the next level, you learn the lesson,
Mm.
and then you get another exam.
So it's I think what I'm really hearing there as well, it's and from hearing your story, it's about taking ownership. It's about
Exactly.
taking ownership for your own actions. And there's right there, it's about saying, I was wrong, I've been
Yeah,
wrong, or I'm not thinking I'm not thinking right at the moment. You know, it's about owning it's all along those lines. It's all about saying, I need to say sorry. Sorry, either
yeah,
to myself, sorry to the people I've hurt around me in this crazy journey I've been, selfishly, going on. And that can also be, the consequence of trying to follow a dream. You can hurt
yeah,
people around you because you're so intent on trying to follow this dream that actually you don't give a shit about anyone else. And
yeah,
and that's something to be aware of as a human. And as you say, it's about then, okay, knowing and taking ownership and realizing, right, this lesson, where I'm at right now, etc. It's all my doing. I
yeah,
put myself here. But on a softer level, because not everyone ends up in a detention center, but on a softer level, they can hurt a lot of people around them along the way.
yeah,
And again, who knows what lessons different people get, but it's I think that's one of the most beautiful messages for me, because everyone interprets like a painting, right? Everyone
yeah,
interprets a life story differently. But for me, I think what I really appreciate from this is about, you know, admitting wrong, admitting our own doings and owning them, and then from that growing and allowing for that next exam to come our way, right? Because we
yeah,
want those exams, otherwise life would be so boring.
yeah. That's right. Most definitely. And sometimes it's just being open also to learn from other people's experiences,
Mm.
because uh, maybe you're not going to have the exam, but you need the lesson. And that is why
Yeah.
sometimes I mean that's why I was very inspired to be on your show, because I think what you're doing is amazingly inspiring, because you're just putting it out there just as it is. Pick out of it what you pick out of it, but this is it. And so I
Mm.
decided to just bring it all and say it like it is, just leave nothing out.
Yeah. You
Yeah,
earlier on you said, when you entered the detention center and they made you take off your clothes, you said, I've never said this before.
yeah.
And we are going to lead towards closing. Sorry, because I know I'm seeing we're already in 2 hours 10. But you said that I've never said this before. What was that? What had you
Uh,
never said before?
that experience of uh, taking off my clothes,
Mm.
I mean, it was so humiliating at a level that I had never experienced. I wrote
Yeah.
about it in the book, but I had never like said it on a podcast before, or even
Mm.
publicly. But I feel yeah, that's what happened. And it's part of my experience.
Yeah.
And I'm here now.
Wow, it's almost like God wanted to strip you down so hard for you to learn this lesson, right? Of look at yourself,
Yeah,
be vulnerable, look at yourself so naked, so
yeah,
so vulnerable to
yeah.
really, then yeah, become this beautiful, giving human being.
And it was quite humbling.
Wow. Well, thanks for sharing it with us.
You're welcome.
And thanks so much for coming on the show. And thank you, Sonia, when you're watching this, for introducing Kenneth to me and to all of our listeners everywhere.
You're welcome. I'm so glad we made time for this, and
Yeah,
I'm
cool.
looking
Well, we'll
forward to
be in
listening to it
touch.
myself.
Definitely. We'll be in touch. I never just disappear because I always feel like I have such a personal conversation, with everyone. So you'll hear from me probably later. You'll get a nice little message and, so I won't just suddenly disappear.
Yeah,
But yeah, we'll stay in contact over the next weeks.
awesome.
Cool, Kenneth.
Thank you so much.
Have an amazing day.
You too.
Thank you.
Welcome.
It's for living. Let's see where this all might lead. I said life is for living. Let's see where this all might lead.